Gregory. The moderator for this morning's panel, it's my pleasure to make the introduction of Gary L. Gregory, who I'm sure is no stranger to most of you in the room. I've had the pleasure of knowing Gary now for quite a number of years. We share a common bond in terms of having been associated with the U.S. Coast Guard for a number of years, and we still like each other. Right? So it's
yes,
good.
Of course, Bruce.
Yeah. Thank you. Captain, Commander.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Captain.
Right.
Once a coastie, always a coastie,
That's
I think
it.
is what
Yeah,
they say.
and the pecking order never changes, by the way. So it doesn't matter whether you're still in uniform or out. Gary has over 40 years of experience in the maritime industry. He doesn't look it, but he has 40 years of experience there. Federal and state regulator, an industry consultant, and an oil spill responder. Currently the owner of Gregory Maritime Consulting, Mr. Gregory was chairman and president of the International Propeller Club, Port of Los Angeles, Long Beach, from 2008 to 2013. From 1990 to late 2010, Mr. Gregory was the chief of Marine Facilities Division of the California State Lands Commission. And I will add to that he's one of the few gentlemen that I've ever met in my life who's actually retired 3 times from the same job. So the state brought him back twice to reassume those duties on an interim basis, and he only just recently left for the 3rd and final time, I think. Final time?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, because you're moving to
Captain.
Nevada, right? Soon. Oh, don't tell anybody. Never mind. There's lots of water in Nevada, too, at least in some places. He directed development and daily operations of the Commission's marine oil terminal inspection and oil transfer monitoring programs from their inception until his retirement. Before working with state lands, Mr. Gregory completed a successful Coast Guard career of over 20 years, retiring as a commander in 1990. Gary is a graduate of the University of California, Davis, has an MBA awarded by the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. I'm going to allow Gary to introduce the members of his panel. So with that, please welcome the panel and Gary Gregory.
Should I say thank you to Bruce? I know it was rather dubious. Of course, you all know more about me now than you ever wanted to know, but congratulations. It is a pleasure to be here. I've been involved with the maritime industry for about 43 years, and the vast majority of that time has been spent looking at the transport of oil, either as a regulator or, in fact, an inspector, and being involved in that specific part of the maritime community. And I've worked very hard over the last few years with Cal MidSAC and California Maritime Leadership Symposium to try and bring oil to the fore, because oil and petroleum is a critical factor in our marine transportation system. Without oil coming into our refineries, without product being moved by vessels, we don't have a goods movement system, because we don't have the fuel that the other components of that goods movement system need to have. And yet we're very frequently overlooked in terms of oil transportation. And we are very, very lucky to have a tremendous panel here to talk about what's going on with oil transportation right now. And we are in the midst of a change in how things are going with oil. And we're lucky to have Tom Cullen here, the administrator of the Office of Spill Prevention and Response, to talk about that. But first, I get the pleasure of introducing Anil Mathur. Anil and I have known each other for a few years, and it's been a pleasure. He's the president and CEO of Alaska Tanker Company since 2001. In 2005, he was named the CEO that gets it, okay, by the National Safety Council. This man and his company have done amazing things with safety and pollution prevention. He runs the safest tanker company in the world, without doubt, and a pollution-free operation. He's won numerous awards, and he was recognized by the Maritime Trades Department for the safety performance of the Alaska Tanker Company. And again, demonstrably the safest tanker company in the world. Anil holds an MBA from the University of California at Berkeley. Go Bears. No? I mean, even people from Davis, think, never mind. And he has an MS in engineering from the University of Tulsa, Oklahoma. He's an alumnus of the Harvard Business School. And prior to ATC, Anil worked for BP for 20 years and assignments in commercial, technical, and operational roles in the U.S. and the U.K. Ladies and gentlemen, Anil Mathur.
I'll show my slides from here or from where?
I'll do it up here.
Okay. Good morning. So the three of us were in the bar last night, and I left my credit card there, and this morning I found it. So I've started the day off right. But we were thinking, what is it that our key messages might be this morning? And a lot depends on you. So can I just have a show of hands of what your affiliation is? How many of you are affiliated with the Cal Maritime Academy? Thank you. And how many are regulators? I'll break the government into regulators and, congressman types. How many regulator types? Thank you. And working for the government, the state government? And any industry people? Oh, very nice. Thank you. All right. So that helps me, and I hope it helps Tom and Lynn. So I thought first thing I'd do is show you a slide of, so we're an Alaska tanker company. We transport a third of the oil produced in Alaska out of Alaska. 1 in 10 barrels of oil that comes into California comes on our ships. 1 in 10 barrels of oil that come into the state of Washington comes on our ships. So we're involved in this coastal trade, up and down from Alaska to California and Washington state. We have 4 big tankers. They're as long as the Empire State is big. We have only 26 people working on the tanker at one time. And so just to put things in perspective, it's very nice to sit here in an air-conditioned room, and talk about safety and what others should do. But this is a picture of one of my ships this winter in the Gulf of Alaska. You can see the wave coming on top of it. So the freeboard there was about 60 feet. That's an 80-foot wave hitting it. And everyone's kind of hanging on for dear life. So it's a good thing to just keep perspective of what you're regulating, what laws you're passing help, and what the industry really faces. So I'll go to the next slide. Does this do it?
You should do it.
Oh,
You're there.
someone else did it. So I want to first talk about safety. And given Gary's remarks, I think we have a right to do that. We're the only tanker company in the world that has ever received the STOP award from the US Coast Guard. They give out the Benkert Award every 2 years. And once in a while, for large ships, small ships, foreign ships, terminals, they give the top award. And that's an Osprey. So we're the only tanker company in the world that's ever got that. So we're very proud of that because this is our regulator talking. Next one. Thank you. Real quick, we've gone, the reason we know we are safest is we've gone 18 million man-hours and 10 years with only one lost time injury. A lost time injury is one where the guy can't return to work on his next shift. And that was because a guy broke, one of the ABs broke this bone, but he's healed and he's back. Prior to that, you can say we started off with more injuries. We were kind of industry average. We were having a lost time injury every month. So because there's some maritime graduate student types here, I'll talk about safety systems for a minute. Next one. This is the crude oil spills to sea. We've carried 1.5 billion barrels of oil. And in that time, you can see in the last 10 years, we've not spilled a single drop of oil to sea. So the standards to come to work in Alaska Tanker Company are high. It's not for everybody. There are other companies that will actually pay you more than we do. But the living conditions are better. It's a coastwise trade. And if you want to live your life for something a little bigger than just your self-interest, it's a good place to work. Next one. So safety. I'm going to be a little provocative towards the end and show you some of the incidents we've actually had with new graduates coming into my company. But in any safety system, there's really 3 layers of protection. The first is the operations and mechanical integrity of the ship itself. You know, its design, its hull, its machinery. The second layer of protection is the safety management system. How we have quality control, our job hazard analysis, our operating procedures. And the third level of protection is the culture, behavior, and training of the workforce. All of these have holes in them. And we spend our days and nights trying to make those holes smaller. But for an incident to actually happen, all 3 have to fail. And some of the instances I'll show you, we didn't actually have a spill or a problem, even though there was a problem with that last training level of the people coming in. The reason it didn't actually cause an incident are the first 2 protections in the system. All right, let's go to the next one. It's really important to have a no-fault near-miss reporting system. We have a very robust system. There's a theory, the left-hand pyramid is the theory, that for every fatality, typically you would have had 1,000 near misses. So here's a key message. If anyone tells you, oh, we've had an excellent record, but I don't know how come this bad thing happened, don't believe it. It's highly unlikely that a really bad thing will happen unless you've had a lot of small bad things happen before. It can be true, but it's unlikely to be true. And then you can see our actual data in 2001 when we started. We had 5 lost time injuries and only 40 reported near misses. And last year we had none of those injuries, but we had 800 reported near misses. A near miss is something which could have caused either a small injury or a spill even on the ship itself. But for the grace of God or some other safety reason, safety prevention system, it didn't result in an injury. So we have a no-fault near-miss reporting system. If you screw up, but you put up your hand and say, I screwed up, nothing bad will happen to you. And the reason is we want to cure the underlying system or issue. Because if Joe screwed up, maybe Bob would next time. Next one, please. So I want to talk about the input into Alaska Tanker Company. And this is a list of some of the incidents we've had. I won't, of course, go through all of them. But the first one is one of the mates on one of my ships closed off the pump, the discharge valve to the pump, while the pump was still running. There are all kinds of problems like that. You see in the middle on July 6, 2012, we lost 250 gallons on the ship itself because the fellow didn't know what the piping system looked like. September 20th, 2013, a lube oil purifier bowl. The guy didn't know how to maintain it, even though he was trained in it, but when he went to do it, he couldn't do it. The point of showing this to you is not that our expectation is that when you come in, you know how to do these things. The point in showing this to you is that we will provide you the training to do it, and after that, you're expected to do it. The 4 ships we have are state-of-the-art ships which have advanced process controls. So you can turn on engines, turn on pipes, just by touching the screen. And there's a certain visceral learning we get, people my age get, because when we operated pumps and valves, we actually had to go turn it. So if you screw it up, there's noise, there's vibration, you know it's happening. Now, because of these advanced process control systems, you're in a remote place. And you can get finger happy, touching the screen. And my comment there to you is, there are only 26 people on that ship that has more than 50 million gallons of oil. Your actions matter, and you have to be accountable for what you do. as students coming in. So before you go touching anything, you need to be sure you know what you're doing. Otherwise, don't do it. Ask. We have a culture where you can do that. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Next one. These are more examples. I'll skip it. Next one. The next thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is how you run a ship and what kind of culture you put to run a ship. And what I've tried to do here, team, is break it into 3 parts. The first one is when your performance is mediocre or poor. That requires a different leadership style. And that leadership style is, go do that job, you can't do it, there's the door. It's directive. If there is an incident, you go and smack on the face. It is a significant emotional event in the life of the person if he screws up. Because you can't talk people, you can't coach people in this just high-risk environment where the Exxon Valdez happened if the performance is poor. And that's what we did. That's what I did in 2001. And then slowly the performance started improving. And the second stage we got to was where we had anecdotal evidence of people doing extraordinary jobs, ordinary people performing at an extraordinary level. And what you do is you start recognizing that. You start promoting that. You find informal leaders in the organization, and you start giving them the voice to try and change the culture from within. And that's a more interdependent style, and it's followed up by powerful anecdotal stories. Where we are now, with 0 injuries, if I tried this stunt of, hey, if you don't like it, there's the door, I'd fall on my face, because they get it. The workforce in ATC is turned on, it's jazzed. There is no room for that kind of style. And so the question becomes, at this level of performance, what do we do to go to the next level? And here we are finding what really matters is the softer skills. What do I mean by that? One is emotional intelligence. The competencies that make up emotional intelligence are self-awareness, awareness of others, awareness of your impact on others, impulse control. You know, when someone's bothering the crap out of you, you don't go and squeeze his neck. That's impulse control. And the beauty of these competencies is they can actually be acquired. It's not like you're born with it. Some have a natural predisposition, but all these competencies can be taught. So we've been doing that shipboard now for 7 or 8 years. Another thing is becoming aware of your personal bias. So you already have a view of a guy before he opens his mouth and says something to you. He's black, he's white, you know, male, female, old, young, whatever. And these are unconscious biases. Our view is there's nothing wrong with the bias. The power of it's a natural thing. It's endemic to being human to have a bias. And there's neurological reasons for that. But the point is, once you become aware of it, you can overcome the power of the bias. And ask yourself, is it really relevant that this guy is a Filipino, an able-bodied seaman, in me actually listening to what he says? So we provide training in that. If you see any individual as having a mindset, a skill set, and a tool set, the incoming graduates into Alaska Tanker Company have excellent skill sets. What we work on is on the mindset. Safety is important. And for altering performance, the most leveraging thing you can do is control a person's mindset. So that's what we're trying to do there. So can you click through this a little more, please? Thank you. Why do we do EI training? It's not like we're trying to make good guys in ATC. I mean, we have sailors. What you're trying to do is raise the level of emotional intelligence so it improves the quality of the communication. And once you have good quality communication, it improves the quality of the programs you can put in, and that ultimately drives safety and environmental performance. That's all we're about, is our performance. These are tools to get there. Is there are there more slides? Oh, these are some of the competencies that make up emotional intelligence, like I mentioned: self-awareness, assertiveness, empathy, problem-solving, impulse control. And the reason we break them down this way is ultimately, this is a framework. Emotional intelligence is a framework. The power of a framework is if you can take the framework and convert it into action, because action delivers results. You know, you can think all you want, you can ponder, you can duck, bob, weave. Ultimately, you have to actually do something. And the emotional intelligence framework permits you to acquire a certain set of skills in a systematic way that improves your overall performance. So that's all I had. Have I taken too long? I'm sorry if I did.
Fine.
I'll turn it over to you guys.
Thank you, Anil. Those are all fine words to a regulator's heart, Anil. Thank you. Our next speaker is Lynn Muench. Lynn is Senior Vice President in Regional Advocacy at the American Waterways Operators. Lynn joined AWO as a Regional VP in the spring of 2001, assuming the primary advocacy role on regional industry issues in AWO's Midwest and Ohio Valley regions with the state legislatures and federal agencies. Her responsibilities include managing key river issues, interfacing with state and federal organizations, legislative personnel, the media, and all of that goes along with our industry. It is interesting that Lynn's beginnings were actually in agriculture, and she found that the transportation aspects of agriculture also were fascinating, and it moved her into where she is today with the American Waterways Operators. I like this, her bio actually says her passion for transportation, and I think that word speaks volumes. Lynn earned a BS in agronomy and adult education from the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and has completed work for her master's at the University of South Florida. She lives in St. Louis with her husband, Stephen. Lynn Muench.
Well, two things. One, my husband doesn't really know I live with him because I'm never there. And two, we had a briefing on what we were going to say and how we were going to do it on Wednesday. And Gary, although he has never met me, immediately said, "I will cut you off at 15 minutes." So I'm not sure what I did during that call, but apparently it wasn't very pleasant. Anyhow, AWO, I understand, has not previously spoke at one of these symposiums, so I thought maybe I should just do some quick background on who AWO is and a little bit about the towing industry. We're the National Trade Association for the tugboat, towboat, and barge industry. So we represent the owners and operators of over 44,000 towing vessels and 27,000 barges throughout the nation's waterways. So that includes the rivers, the Great Lakes, and every coast. The vessels operate in the Jones Act trade, so they're all American-owned, American-built, American-crewed. And the towing industry actually accounts for over 3/4 of the U.S. commercial fleet, which is pretty large, and I think a lot of people don't recognize that. AWO members are really an economic force in California and the nation. A young man or woman can leave high school, not college, but high school, and get a job, and not just a job, but embark on a career ladder. They can start at roughly $45,000 a year, and with hard work and staying focused, can rise through the ranks fairly quickly, and within a few years make over $100,000 as a captain or a pilot. So the domestic industry is really important, really creating family wage jobs for a lot of people throughout the nation, not just here in California. In California, the AWO members engage in ship assist work for the U.S. Navy and the cruise industry in San Diego. They dock and fuel ships in the nation's largest container port in L.A. Long Beach. And in Northern California, we're moving commodities in and out of the Bay and Delta area. And most relevant to the discussion today, we are moving both crude and petroleum, refined petroleum products to terminals and refineries throughout the state. The petroleum market is changing throughout the entire nation, and I can tell you that living in the city of St. Louis and watching what goes past the arch, and certainly that is also reflected in the West Coast. Domestic crude oil is coming out of the interior U.S. and Canada for export and refinement on the West Coast refineries. Unprecedented volume of crude is moving by train. There are a lot of proposed pipelines in the mill. And if you talk to anybody in North Dakota, they'll tell you that they see increased extraction for the coming years, and so they expect a lot of changes, and we should too. We believe that AWO operators are uniquely positioned for success in this changing environment, and we believe that the state the best interest of the state would be to encourage that success. The towing industry is positioned for success because of a number of reasons, but three really stand out. First, and I think all of you know this, that marine transportation presents the safest and the most environmentally sustainable means of moving oil, or really any product. The vessels in this trade are crewed by experienced, highly trained mariners, and the vessels are technologically advanced and optimally sized for efficient coastwise movements. And most importantly, and this goes to a lot of what Anil was talking about, the towing industry is committed to a rigorous safety management system and continuous improvement that says that we have collectively reduced oil spills over the last several years by over 99.6%. One could say that the industry is pathologically driven by safety and environmental protection. It is in the DNA of the towing industry. The towing safety record is reflected in the Coast Guard casualty statistics and highlighted in a 2012 report by the Texas Transportation Institute, which showed that the barge transportation has the lowest rate of oil spills among all transportation modes. Since the passage of OPA 90, you have an industry that has stepped up to self-regulate, and dramatic improvements have followed. In 1994, AWO members voted to take safety beyond regulation through a Coast Guard awarded program, the Responsible Carrier Program. RCP is a safety management system, or SMS, with regularly audited comprehensive safety standards that evaluate personnel, training, equipment, and business and operational processes that drive companies towards continuous improvement, zero lost time incidences, and zero oil spills. RCP certification is a condition of AWO membership. Companies that move oil in California are held to other standards, of course, also including SIRE and tanker management self-assessment. We see all these programs working synergistically for safety management systems that consistently meet ongoing higher and higher expectations. These high expectations have ensured the development of robust safety cultures within these companies, that is, companies voluntarily going above and beyond regulatory standards because it's just the right thing to do for the industry and for the nation. In a quest for continuous improvement, in 2010, the AWO Board of Directors established the Future of Safety Leadership Task Force and lovingly called it FOSSIL, which I think is awful, but that's what I'm going to call it from now on. FOSSIL was tasked with developing recommendations for continuing AWO's leadership in safety and environmental stewardship. FOSSIL recommended the creation of 4 work groups. The first work group has finished its work, the Safety Statistics Reporting Group. We'll be very busy this year implementing those recommendations, making it mandatory for every AWO member to report all incidences that go on their vessels. I've lost a page. I'll go on from there. The other things that are coming out of FOSSIL is near miss and lessons learned. Also in environmental stewardship, because we've done a lot of things over the years in environmental stewardship that we haven't cataloged, but we really want to be the leaders on that, so we're going forward with that. and a towing vessel continuous improvement program. OPA 90 mandated the requirement also of double-hulled barges, vessel response plans, and salvage and firefighting requirements. A year before the federally mandated deadline, there are no more single-hulled barges in use on the West Coast. In regards to salvage and marine firefighting standards, in 2011, the Coast Guard updated regulations to ensure appropriate salvage and marine firefighting resources were identified. Just last month, the Coast Guard issued a notice of proposed rulemaking to amend regulations for the design and approval standards for fire protection, detection, and extinguishing equipment to harmonize Coast Guard and international standards, as well as address advances in technology. The tugs handling oil in California have strict equipment practices too, redundant steering, and Z-drive or other similar propulsion systems. These vessels also comply with very stringent security requirements, including the well-loved Transportation Worker Identification Credential Program, as well as requiring security plans for the vessels. The industry spends millions of dollars each year to assess each deck officer and fitness, requiring rigorous simulator training on the coasts and on the rivers and in the Great Lakes. All this creates an environment that fosters our success and builds trust between the industry, our employees, our regulators, and our customers and stakeholders. I would also like to add a bit about our collaboration with the Coast Guard and state agencies and all government partners, something else that really is in the DNA of the towing industry. We've had some very positive examples of this collaboration, and one I'd like to point to happened in 2010 when California-based tugboat and barge operators assisted with the development of a standard of care for bunkering operations as an alternative to state regulation. The California Office of Spill Prevention and Response worked with the harbor safety committees of San Francisco and LA Long Beach and developed best practices in lieu of new regulations. This process presented the best of both worlds. It allowed the industry to develop area-specific best practices for bunkering with the outcome of the best achievable protection. And it spared regulators and the regulated community from a protracted and costly rulemaking. We think that's the right way to go when we can. Recent drills to understand the capacity of towing vessels to react to a distressful situation show that in the Bay Area there is a sufficient number of towing vessels to respond in an emergency, and a dedicated rescue tug would not lower risk and is not a good use of resources. We'd like to continue to work with the state on that issue. Another area of spill prevention and response that merits some attention is the effort to update drilling and spill management team regulations. Here we would like to see regulations consistent with operational policies. The current regulations make it difficult to maintain in-house teams to respond at a moment's notice and require a lot of resources for a drill. California towing companies take the integrity of a spill response system seriously, but the current proposed drilling requirements essentially creates a scripted event that distracts from the purpose of responding to these spills in a timely manner. The regulatory structure for a spill management team puts an unnecessary burden on the plan holders, and we believe the state is better positioned to demand specific performance standards from spill management teams than the plan holders are. The industry would like to work with OSPR as we look for ways to identify the greatest risks and examine how we can efficiently attack our response gaps. Another request from the industry is that California implement a streamlined response plan approvals for towing vessels. States have had success with registering vessels online in an easy process without extraneous information and a large paperwork burden. Umbrella plans could effectively minimize the state's burden in approving these plans. This would be a common sense way to alleviate the burden on companies, and it is supported by the fact that there has not been a towing vessel spill in California in 20 years. It would be a win-win for the state and the industry by decreasing bureaucracy and minimizing the use of scarce resources. On the subject of vessel operations, AWO has been a strong and vocal supporter of the regulatory authority of the U.S. Coast Guard. A consistent federal regulatory framework is absolutely necessary to enable this vital mode of interstate commerce. Our vessels move all around the country, and there are some very obvious problems that arise when issues like navigation safety, training and certification, design and equipment standards, and manning complements become decentralized at the state level. The lack of clear, uniform federal laws creates ambiguity that makes compliance confusing and, in more than one case, simply impossible. California is a state with a very robust regulatory apparatus, and while our current relationships with California agencies are strong and based on mutual respect, we need to be mindful of the respectful roles of federal and state regulators. In conclusion, I'd like to say that California should be encouraging marine oil transportation wherever possible. On top of our safety record, we alleviate traffic, we burn less fuel, and provide good-paying jobs for thousands of Californians. AWO members transport oil safely and efficiently up and down California's coast. This is facilitated most often by common sense, state and federal laws and regulations, and oversight on spill prevention and response programs, and AWO's members' dedication to safety demonstrated by the ongoing effort made during continuous improvement and zero spills. AWO will also continue to work with the Towing Vessel Safety Advisory Committee, TSAC, is a congressionally authorized advisory committee on appropriate requirements for manning on vessels in domestic and international voyages. TSAC's recommendations take into account the practical realities of vessel operations and concerns of manning today. With the help of the Coast Guard, the state, our industry partners, and customers, AWO can provide these services in a safe, environmentally friendly, and cost-effective way that would provide good jobs right here in California. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, I think we're doing that at the end, right, Gary? Thank you.
Thank you. Well done.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. That was terrific. I think I would be remiss if I didn't point out that through the work of these fine industry folks, and please, Laura Covery in the back, excuse me if I get the numbers somewhat mixed up, but in 2012, we moved across the dock at Marine Oil Terminals something in the realm of 27.3 billion gallons of oil, and we had 12 oil spills, and 16 gallons of oil made it into the water during those transfer operations. That, of course, is an absolutely incredible and amazing record. And this industry works very, very hard to be good stewards of the environment and safety, pollution prevention, an outstanding job. And in my 43 years, they've been a pleasure to work with, absolutely a pleasure to work with. Had to beat them a couple of times, but, for the most part, good folks. Our last
Gary's
person.
much nicer now than when he was a regulator.
I don't know about that.
Lynn's not too sure about that. The last person we have on our panel is one of those nasty regulators. We have Thomas Cullen. Tom is the administrator of the Office of Spill Prevention and Response at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. He was appointed by Governor Jerry Brown as the administrator in June of 2011. He also serves as one of two chief deputy directors of the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And he directs a team of scientists, environmental specialists, game wardens, and support personnel in protecting and preserving the 1,100-mile coastline, the 30,000 miles of rivers and streams, and 4,800 lakes that are part of the waters of California, protecting them from oil and deleterious substances. Tom served in the U.S. Coast Guard for 27 years, another coastie, retiring at the rank of captain. From 2008 to 2010, he was the Deputy Sector Commander for Coast Guard Sector San Francisco. Those of us that work in California know about San Francisco, wide-ranging roles and responsibilities, and a model for how things should be done working with the industry. And Tom deserves a lot of credit for that. Tom received his bachelor's and a commission from the U.S. Coast Guard Academy in ocean engineering, and later received a master's in science and industrial administration from the Krannert Graduate School of Management at Purdue University. Tom doesn't frequently point this out, but he's a pilot, and he's a flyer. He's an aviator. What did we used to call those guys in the Coast Guard? I don't know. We had some derogatory term for aviators in the Coast Guard. Bruce, where are you? Anyway.
Come on, move.
Tom is an expert in his field, and we are very, very lucky to have him with us today. Tom.
I suppose now being referred to as a nasty regular, I'm not in good stead on tracking to get the Gregory Lifetime Leadership Award.
Oh, you're right on.
I'll be adding that to my resume. Oops, there we go.
Here we go.
All right, well, good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure and honor to be with you this morning, particularly with this very distinguished panel of colleagues and friends, I might add. I still consider you a friend, Gary.
Thank you.
I want to pay back some compliments, Lynn. Thank you so much for recognizing our bunkering and monitoring lightering program. You know, we've put together, you know, with Captain Lynn Korwatch, the Harbor Safety Committee, my rep, you know, Captain Jeff Cowan. The compliment in return is, I mentioned to you last night we were sitting before we stole Anil's credit card, that I was so impressed with your annual report last year with the last couple of pages that had a remarkable infographic, that when we started putting together this presentation to talk about the shifting trends in oil transport in California, that I referred back. I showed that. I said, I want to tell a story through pictures, and I think that you'll see in the presentation I'm about to share with you that we achieved that, right? We give this probably 3 or 4 times a week. This is not the entire presentation. I took some, you know, some of the key slides, the elements to share with you this morning, but it tells a pretty compelling story. To start out, I just wanted to give you an introduction to what is the Office of Spill Prevention and Response. From this point, I'll call it OSPR. Created in 1991. That, of course, Open 90 happened at the federal level, and with Exxon Valdez, and here in California, the American Trader spill, there was the Leonard Sea Strand Oil Pollution Act, and we stood up. We're the lead agency for all oil spills in California marine waters. We'll get to that distinction in a second. We have a standard of best achievable protection. It's one of those goals that we're always striving to reach. That line is always moving out there. And so we've set up a program to try to do that. This is kind of the headquarters senior staff elements. You know, you'll see scientific, enforcement, preparedness. My chief of preparedness is in the back there, as well as my chief scientist. Marine safety is huge. We have offices up and down the state. Won't read through all of these. Key on the 3 big mission areas of prevention, preparedness, response. I ran out of room on the slide because there's another very important one that comes after response, and that would be restoration. We as trustees for all the state's natural resources play a key role in the restoration of those resources. If you look 23 years either side of when OSPR was created, you can see the success of the program. Now, we can't take all of the credit for that, but all those big spills represented on the left side were prior to Open 90, Leonard Sea Strand. The coming together of all of the various functions that make up the NIMS, the Incident Command System, you know, robust drills and practicing, you know, various functions that, you know, will, you know, be most effective, to keep things from happening. Most of the tall bars on the left side are related to the oil industry. Most of the smaller spills on the right, including Koskobusan, which we would never describe as being a small spill. There's no such thing. But in just simple volume, you know, it was not a big event compared to releases in the past. And most of these, with probably one exception, Platform Irene, were not oil industry vessels. How are we funded? Most of you know it's a per barrel fee, not a tax, a fee that stays with that, that market sector. All of the money goes into a fund we call the OSPAF, the Oil Spill Prevention Administration Fund. You heard Ms. Yee this morning describe it about $40 million annually, collected in proportion to the size of those boxes right there on oil coming into marine terminals in California. So about 70% of the crude that comes into California comes in by sea and is assigned the fee of 6.5 cents. Here's another way of looking at where it comes from: Alaska, foreign sources, inland production in California, as well as some offshore platforms. And it comes in by tanker or by barge and pipeline. There's some weighted arrows that kind of show proportionally how it comes in, and this is where we assign that fee. Now we're looking at the trends going into the future, subject of my talk this morning, and we expect that within the next couple of years that there's going to be a fairly dramatic shift as more comes in by rail. That is going to be displacing, since California has a relatively fixed refining capacity. There's about 20 refineries statewide, 14 of which handle crude oil. It's a fairly straight line. So as Alaska trails off, it had been made up for in the past with foreign. Well, the new increases in the domestic production is going to displace some of this that's coming offshore. It's no secret that more is being produced out of the North Dakota, the Montana, some of the plays. This shows January of 11. That curve is going higher. It's going to peak just shy of about 1 million barrels produced per day out of those formations. I call this the Rock of Gibraltar side. These are the various formations in the Bakken play in North Dakota. Of course, here we are, 2014. The very accomplished resource economist on my staff that's done a lot of this research and usually gives this presentation. He says I think he says this because he knows I was an aviator, if we were an airplane, we'd be in the first 5 seconds of flight. It's a very exciting time to think that we are really looking at perhaps oil independence in the next couple of years. Some projections say that in the next year, the U.S. will pass Saudi Arabia and Russia as being the world's #1 oil producer. This kind of tells the story too. These are shots from space. Here's Chicago, Minneapolis. This is the Bakken play, and here you see at night how big the growth is. That's a combination of lights at platforms and flaring. If you look at a daytime picture, here's just farmland, 2005, bunch of little dots, and each one of those dots, of course, is a production well. Took out some of the animations here, just threw it, make it a little bit busier. But here's the various crudes that we handle in California. Tar sands up here, heavier than water, brings concerns there, of course. California, the shapes of these diamonds vary because there's a range of the specific gravity and sulfur content. Down here's refined gasoline, and here's Bakken. It's coming out of the ground almost perfectly refined. It's the only crude oil, I'm told, that you could put a match to and it will ignite because of its extremely low flash point. So there's concerns that are associated with that. We've heard stories that in emergencies up in North Dakota that some of the folks can put Bakken straight into gas tanks and with their filtration run an engine, for a short time. How's it getting here? We've looked at several of the permit applications for new rail facilities and yards and so forth, and we've kind of put together a projection of about 143 million barrels a year, or about 6 unit trains a day. I'll describe what a unit train is shortly, coming in. We have an unknown for Kern Bakersfield because they already have an existing facility. There's not a new permit applied for, so we're using existing numbers. Also, as Lynn mentioned, there's going to be crude coming in by barge. I had the privilege of visiting the Anacortes facility up in Washington State back in September. Very impressed with some of the safety measures I saw in place there. Huge containment of a bathtub of concrete for handling, 100 cars 26 times a month. Electrical grounding, and so forth. But that's all going to go onto outgoing tankers or barges, and a lot of that's going to be coming down to California. So we estimate about 100 to 200 million barrels a year. We took the midpoint of that, about 150 for our projections going forward. There's a unit train up top. We'll talk again more about that in a second. Some boxes that show where the groupings of refineries in the state of California and some of the major rail routes. Right now, we're mainly seeing the crude coming down by rail here, working its way down to Bakersfield. If you superimpose it on some of our, what we're mainly concerned with our waterways, streams and rivers and bays and so forth, there's tens of thousands of crossings, sometimes running parallel to water. This is right nearby. This is the Yolo bypass. Here's a unit train. And it was interesting when Dr. Hampton took this picture on his way home one day, he noticed a lot of these little markers. And another concern, there's buried pipeline near most of these rights-of-way that rail enjoys. These trains are heavy. These trains do put, there's a cyclic load, vibration and so forth. We have to be better positioned working with our partners. Pipelines would be the State Fire Marshal, rail, Federal Railway Administration, and the Public Utility Commission to be aware of what are the plans in place should something happen. I took this picture in October. I was about 39,000 feet on a Southwest flight coming back from the East Coast. You can see my Red Sox logo on my shirt. There's my hand. And I looked out, and I see this river, and I see a track here. I thank goodness my iPhone has the resolution. I zoomed in, and what did I see? Look at this black line. That's a unit train. I spent more of my time on that flight from St. Louis to Denver looking out, and I think I counted 4 of those making their way, through the country. They're out there. It's happening now. This is a graphic taken from a New York Times article, I believe it was about 2 weeks ago, fairly dramatic, that shows the volume that's been spilled with rail accidents. Now, I think it's very important, especially if there's any of my friends from the rail industry who've been very gracious in meeting with us. We're not saying that rail's more dangerous. We're saying that because of the volumes, the increased volumes that are happening, they say, and we believe them, that 99.997% of the materials that they transport arrive safely at their destination. Unfortunately, when you look at that 0.003%, when you have the huge volumes that are being transported, it's quite a significant concern. For this 37-year period from 75 to 12, just shy of 800,000, I think that is gallons. Is it? Okay, yeah, it is gallons, thank you. When you take the Castleton, North Dakota spill that happened right at the end of the last year and projected up, this number is actually 1.5 million just in calendar year 13 alone. Here are the 5 major accidents that happened by rail, 2 in Canada, 3 here in the US. Most folks are familiar with the Lac-Mégantic tragedy in July in Quebec. 47 people were tragically killed in that. The interesting thing about each one of these, and the theme, if you heard it earlier, is not just oil transport, but also safety. Each one of these had a different causal effect. My background in aviation, Anil's slide that showed that the holes with the vectors, we call that the Swiss cheese model, various protective measures that you could take to try to prevent an accident from happening. Each one of these had 5 different causes, so 5 different slices of that cheese, and how do we shift those so that those holes don't align. And when you look at how many of these cars, derailed and released product into the environment, it's a wide range, but there's quite a few. If you look at a unit train differs from a manifest train in that it carries one product, one commodity. Typically, these unit trains that are rolling now out of North Dakota are about 75 to 100, sometimes a few more, of tank cars. Each one can hold a maximum of 714 barrels. Typically, it's less than that because they're painted black, and due to thermal expansion, you don't want to have it chock full. So just shy of maybe 700 barrels or 30,000 gallons per car. Industry's current standards for their reasonable worst-case scenario, I think those words are familiar with most of you that have contingency plans for what we do in the Maritime, would be the loss of one car. You go back to that previous slide of those 5 accidents, well, the average there is about 20. Now, to put it in perspective, I talked about a very small event in volume that happened, the Casca Busan. That would be 1 1/2 tank cars. So obviously this is a concern to us. California is unique among our other sister states in the Union in that we're bifurcated in that we collect the fee on oil and marine terminals, we expend the fee on programs on the Maritime, or to make it simple, the tidally influenced waters. If we have a spill on the inland, we have to find another means of funding it. Here's just a real quick breakdown that shows number of spills on the marine versus inland. I can't remember what year this was for. I think it was 2010. But you can see that we're not resourced with people or funding to handle inland spills. So a solution's needed. And this is a graph. We have an updated one. This is from 2010. I just got one yesterday that it looks almost exactly the same. The number of oil spills reported statewide through the reporting system to California Office of Emergency Services. We get the reports, we do a triage, decide, what's the response, do we need to establish a unified command, usually dispatch a investigator, a scientist, a safety specialist from our field response team to go and investigate. So we're very grateful that for the first time ever in OSPR's history, we're now included in the governor's proposed budget for 14-15 to expand our program to go truly statewide now, to look like the rest of the union. You remember the graph I showed with the different sources of oil, and we collect the fee below that line for everything in the marine terminals. Well, that's going to be a decline as the increase of domestic oil happens. Here's existing state resources for the various types of programs we're talking about, the prevention side and then the response and readiness restoration side of a spill. We're very well protected on the marine between my office, State Lands Commission with platforms and facilities, the Division of Oil, Gas, and Geothermal Resources within the Department of Conservation is concerned with production facilities, and the State Fire Marshal with pipelines on the prevention side. But when it comes to response, it's not there. Same with rail, Public Utility Commission on the federal side, the FRA, but we need to look at where are the resources for response. So our proposal in the governor's budget would be to expand the current fee of 6.5 cents, not increase it, but expand it to all the crude oil that moves in California, and then implement those preventative preparedness, response, restoration programs to protect all state waters. If you were to look at a barrel and think of that as our responsibility, the size of the barrel is our responsibility, and our current funding, we currently have a structural deficit of about $4 million a year. There's a sunset clause that's going to kick in the end of this year should nothing happen with the budget that would bring us back down to 5 cents. And you can see there's a huge gap. With this current program, as increased production happens, increased movement of crude oil by rail, our ability to go and look at the oil that's moving through California pipelines, we're going to be able to meet all of our needs with that 6.5 cent per barrel fee. Modest growth to our current staff. This is our office, about 245 people. Again, fenced to the marine side. We're going to only add about 38 new positions. We changed the slide again to make sure that folks understand this isn't the inland, this isn't marine. They're all statewide now. We can enjoy those economies of scale of resources now that have established a very effective program in the marine waters. One of the other huge benefits of this is that we're going to be able to access our response fund, which is very much like the federal oil spill liability trust fund, about a $2 billion fund. Ours is about $55 million maximum. And this could front-end the response efforts. We can't do this now for any spills on the inland waters, any spills less than a barrel. And so having that ability and then deal with cost recoveries and so forth later on would be very useful. You saw this before, the various means of transport. It all goes to a refinery, most of it at least, and then made into various products. Don't worry about reading the words. That just shows that spills can happen anywhere along that chain. The logical place to collect the fee would be at the refineries. Why set up little toll plazas everywhere a track comes into California? It's simplest just to go to the refinery as crude oil comes in. And we preserve also the marine fee, should it come from somewhere else, but it will only pay once. Pays once, protects all the way through the system. When we put together this presentation, gas was hovering around $4 a gallon, so that made it a nice and easy round number to look at. Cost of goods sold, about base price about $3.28. Other various fees and taxes applied from the state and federal. You can't see it, but I'll help you. There's a small line right there. If you look at it, that's what we're talking about for our portion of the fee to fund this program to protect all state waters. If you reduce it to a penny, it's a fraction of a penny. I'm hoping that this hammers home the point that this is a very reasonable and important investment to make to protect our resources. Some of the key benefits, of course, basically taking everything you already know about us that we're doing well on the Maritime and taking it to a statewide program. And with that, I'll show you some beautiful pictures of California, Feather River Canyon, and I guess we're to the question phase. Thank you all.
Bruce, do we have time for a few questions?
Yes, we have a few minutes.
So, do we have any questions for this august panel? Oh, you can't let them off this easily.
Yes, he can.
Yes.
Tank cars, do some meet California standards, or do all the tank cars meet California standards?
This is part of our, I'm sorry. This is part of our coalition building investigative phase right now, working with the Public Utilities Commission, who have inspectors that can inspect for both state and federal standards to get a better understanding. My office isn't going to be looking at rail car standards, at rail transportation. We're going to be looking mainly at the contingency plans, making sure that these plans identify oil spill response organizations, strategies for containment, recovery, response times, and so forth. But we're going to be doing that in conjunction with our regulator friends from the various railway side. Tank car specifications, standards are a concern, and it's, there's not a day goes by that there's many stories at a national level. There's various bills in other states and at the federal level, looking at that. But there's also, we're just, again, doing the research, a lot of activity, a lot of retrofits are being, made to the DOT 111 cars with, shielding and rollover protection, new 112 standard cars. So, hope that answered your question.
Other questions? Working on the microphone. You are, Jim?
Osprey's about a dozen years old now. I can remember when Assemblymember Limpert was going around and hitting the stumps. With the response that Lynn was talking about with industry and their training program and the double hull barges and the regulations that have been written, and then if I read the number right, the coastal side is 61,000 gallons total per year out of all sources being spilled. Could we say Osprey has been a success, and with the exception of continuing to do some training and continue to do some enforcement, wind down rather than wind up? To a certain extent, we get into regulatory programs that just keep on going and going, but with the response that the industry has done and the various technical changes that have been made, do we need to continue to do that? Or should we take a look at a new paradigm and say, okay, we have responded. We want to make sure that the enforcement level is still there and the capacity to respond is still there, but we need to have an entire OSPR for the coastal side at least.
Great question. I mean, I think that's part of the whole, Anil had his DuPont pyramid up there, self-awareness, always being introspective, looking at, the best value that can be made. I would offer that, a dramatic decrease in oil spilled, and especially when you look at one particular company and they have 0.000, is that the time to let up? I don't know. I think that I can say that the value that we get for that fraction of that penny and the protective measure in place, it would be perhaps unwise to relax standards, at this point, or scale down on the Maritime. One of the reasons one of the things I'm trying to do also as I give this presentation is to reassure the Maritime side that we're not turning a blind eye, we're not scaling back. We recognize that that's our core, that's our expertise, that's where we've proven ourselves, and that's what makes us, I think, a perfectly positioned agency to move forward when we go statewide.
Time for one more question.
Hi, this is for Mr. Cullen. Mr. Cullen, I know that there's a finite number of refineries, but do you believe that by imposing a 6-cent tax on all imported oil to California, do you think that oil will be moved to other refineries out of our state?
Difficult to say. I mean, I don't know about any California oil that's going to be moved to other refineries. Certainly, a lot of the oil that you saw in my Rock and Gibraltar side, that's been going to Texas, New Jersey, refineries, other states. California's kind of behind right now as they get the infrastructure, the various permits, approved to bring it into California. Could crude come to California, go to a marine terminal, and go somewhere else, whether it's another U.S. facility or if there's a lifting of export bans some other place? I don't know, but the program that we're putting in place right now, we're mainly concerned that as it goes from point A, which is the point that it enters California and could present a risk to our surface state waters, and it leaves the state, that we have measures in place to particularly respond, but hopefully prevent it from going into the environment. So I guess what I'm saying is that we're going to look at trying to collect that fee and then apply that umbrella of protection, throughout the state.
Well, I'd like to thank our panelists, Anil, Mathur, Lynn, Tom Cullen.
And thank you, Gary, for moderating. Okay, we're now at a point where we're ready for our